Admiral Vashy's reconnaissance fleet drifted through the Outer Rim systems, conducting what the Galactic Council euphemistically called peaceful exploration. In reality, they were mapping potential expansion routes and cataloging any primitive species that might need guidance towards civilization. The Admiral's tentacles twitched with boredom as he reviewed the sector reports. Another day, another empty system to add to the ever-growing list of cosmic disappointments. "Sir," announced General Krafnog, his 4 eyes rolling in different directions, "we've detected something interesting in the Kepler 442 system." The way he said interesting suggested it was anything but. Admiral Vashy's attention perked up. In 20 years of service, Krafnog had never found anything more exciting than a particularly aggressive space fungus. "Define interesting, General." "Well, sir," Krafnog paused, consulting his scanner with the enthusiasm of someone reading a tax return. "We're picking up artificial structures, and before you get excited, they appear to be human." The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Admiral Vashy's 3 hearts skipped a beat. Humans, out here? The nearest known human settlement was 12 parsecs away, and these bipedal primates barely had functional faster-than-light travel. "Are you certain?" Vashy demanded, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had conquered 17 star systems. "Run the scan again." Commander Tom Molly, a being whose species had evolved from what humans might generously call aggressive jellyfish, floated over to the sensor station. "Confirmed, Admiral. Definitely human signatures. Looks like they've been out here for quite a while too." He paused, consulting his readings with visible amusement. "By quite a while, I mean approximately 237 years, give or take a decade." The ship's AI, Moran, materialized as a shimmering hologram of geometric patterns. Unlike his organic colleagues, Moran possessed what could charitably be called a personality, though whether this was a feature or a bug remained hotly debated among the engineering staff. "Admiral, I've cross-referenced our databases. The last recorded human expansion in this direction occurred during their Great Colonial Period, which ended rather abruptly when they discovered that space colonization was significantly more expensive and dangerous than their entertainment media had suggested." General Krafnog snorted, which in his species sounded remarkably like a deflating balloon. 200 years without contact with their homeworld. They're probably living in mud huts by now, worshipping broken machinery and wondering why their technology gods have abandoned them. Now, General." Commander Molly interjected with the kind of diplomatic tone that barely concealed his own amusement. "Let's give them some credit. They might have progressed to wooden huts." Admiral Vashy studied the preliminary scan results with growing interest. A lost human colony, isolated for over 2 centuries, probably desperate for contact with the wider galaxy. This could be exactly the kind of easy diplomatic victory the Council was looking for. Perhaps these humans might even be grateful enough to join the Galactic Confederation voluntarily, saving everyone the paperwork involved in a formal annexation. "Moran," he commanded, "what does our database tell us about human technological capabilities from that period?" The AI's geometric form shifted into what might have been a shrug. "Primitive fusion drives, basic energy weapons, rudimentary artificial intelligence systems, roughly equivalent to a particularly clever calculator." Their military doctrine primarily consisted of pointing sharp sticks at their enemies, though they had progressed to pointing sharp sticks that exploded. Quartermaster A, whose actual name was unpronounceable to most species, and who had long ago given up trying to correct anyone, looked up from his supply manifests. His species communicated primarily through sarcasm, making him uniquely qualified for military logistics. "Shall I prepare the standard first contact gift package? Some medical supplies, basic replicator technology, maybe a few educational programs about proper galactic citizenship." "Excellent idea," Admiral Vashy replied, his confidence growing. "This should be straightforward. A simple diplomatic mission to welcome a lost colony back into the galactic community." Commander Molly set course for the inner system, best speed. As the fleet advanced toward the human colony, the mood on the bridge was positively festive. General Krafnog was already composing his after-action report, describing the peaceful integration of another primitive species. Commander Molly was taking bets on how long it would take the humans to surrender their sovereignty in exchange for advanced technology. Even Quartermaster A seemed almost cheerful, as he calculated the minimal resources required for this diplomatic mission. "ETA to the colony world?" Admiral Vashy inquired, settling back in his command chair with satisfaction. This was going to be the easiest assignment of his career. A quick diplomatic contact, some ceremonial gift-giving, and he'd be back at headquarters in time for the victory celebration. Approximately 6 hours at current speed, Moran reported. I'm already preparing standard first contact protocol, peaceful intentions broadcast, universal translator calibration, basic cultural sensitivity guidelines. Make sure to include the standard warnings about not interfering with primitive religious beliefs, General Krafnog added helpfully. These isolated human colonies sometimes develop interesting mythologies about their abandonment. Commander Molly's gelatinous form rippled with what passed for laughter among his species. 20 credits says they've developed a cargo cult around their original transport ships. As the fleet proceeded toward what they assumed would be a simple diplomatic encounter, none of them suspected that their primitive humans had spent the last 2 centuries doing something far more productive than worshipping broken machinery. They had been preparing for war. 3 hours into their approach, Judge Quintara emerged from the communications bay with an expression that could only be described as deeply disturbed. As the fleet's senior intelligence analyst, Quintara had decoded transmissions from 17 different species, ranging from philosophical debates among gas giant dwellers to the mating calls of crystalline beings. Nothing, however, had prepared her for human colony communications. "Admiral," she announced, her voice carrying the tone of someone who had just witnessed something fundamentally wrong with the universe. "I've been monitoring the colony's internal communications for the past hour. I think we may have miscalculated." Admiral Vashy looked up from his ceremonial first contact speech, which he'd been polishing for maximum diplomatic impact. "Miscalculated how, Judge? Are they more primitive than we thought? Do we need to adjust our technology gifts?" Judge Quintara's forearms gestured helplessly as she consulted her datapad. "Sir, they're not primitive. They've spent the last 237 years preparing for what they call the inevitable alien invasion. And by preparing, I mean they've turned their entire society into what can only be described as a paranoid military state." The bridge fell silent. General Krafnog's eyes stopped rolling and focused with laser intensity on Judge Quintara. "Define paranoid military state." "Well," Quintara began, scrolling through her intercepts, "their primary educational curriculum consists of xenobiology, weapons engineering, and something they call advanced paranoia studies. Their children learn to identify alien ship configurations before they learn to read. Their retirement homes double as ammunition factories." And she paused, double-checking her translation matrix. "They have a government department called the Ministry of Inevitable Alien Hostility." Commander Molly's gelatinous form stopped rippling with amusement. "Surely you're joking." "I wish I were," Quintara replied grimly. "Their current defense status is something called Condition Orange, which according to their military handbook means alien contact expected within 72 hours. Prepare for immediate hostilities." Admiral Vashy's confidence began to develop small cracks. "Send Amy Kowalski's reconnaissance team for a closer look. Maybe their communications are exaggerated for some reason." 20 minutes later, Amy Kowalski's voice crackled over the comm system with the kind of bewildered amusement reserved for witnessing the truly absurd. "Admiral, you need to see this for yourself. I'm transmitting visual now." The main screen flickered to life, displaying the human colony in all its militaristic glory. What should have been peaceful farming communities were instead fortified compounds bristling with defensive installations. Civilians walked around, carrying weapons that looked suspiciously advanced for a supposedly isolated colony. Children played in schoolyards, surrounded by anti-aircraft batteries. "Are those kindergartners manning defensive positions?" General Krafnog asked weakly. "Affirmative," Amy replied, her voice carrying a mixture of admiration and horror. "And they appear to be quite competent at it. I watched a 6-year-old correctly identify our ship class and probable weapons loadout." She then asked her teacher if they should activate the big scary alien defense protocol. Brandon Torres, the fleet's chief technical analyst, materialized on screen next to the colony images. His species had evolved from what humans might recognize as extremely judgmental crabs, making him uniquely qualified to provide sardonic commentary on other civilizations' life choices. "Admiral, I've completed my analysis of their defensive installations. The good news is that our initial assessment was correct. Their technology is based on systems that are over 2 centuries old." "And the bad news?" Admiral Vashy asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. "The bad news is that they've spent those 2 centuries improving on it." Brandon continued with the kind of professional detachment that made bad news sound even worse. "They've taken primitive human military technology, Well, imagine if you gave a group of particularly creative and paranoid engineers 200 years to solve the specific problem of how to kill aliens we've never met, but assume want to kill us. The implications began to sink in around the bridge. These weren't primitive humans waiting to be rescued. These were primitive humans who had spent centuries preparing for exactly this moment. Surely they'll be reasonable once we explain our peaceful intentions, Admiral Vashy said, though he no longer sounded convinced. Moran, transmit standard first contact protocols. Universal peace greeting, friendly intentions, desire for mutual cooperation. What happened next would later be described in Admiral Vashy's official report as a fundamental breakdown in diplomatic communications. The human colony's response to their peaceful greeting was immediate, decisive, and nearly catastrophic. Warning klaxons screamed across the bridge as the flagship's shields suddenly blazed with energy impacts. Evasive maneuvers, Admiral Vashy shouted, his diplomatic composure evaporating along with 17% of their forward shielding. Sir, Commander Molly called out, his gelatinous form now a distinctly worried shade of green. They're firing warning shots. At least I hope they're warning shots, because if they're trying to hit us, their accuracy is terrifying. Admiral Drahorn, the fleet's secondary commander, and a being whose species had mastered the art of diplomatic frustration over millennia of dealing with unreasonable neighbors, took over communications. Human colony, this is Admiral Drahorn of the Galactic Confederation. We come in peace. Please cease hostile actions and prepare for diplomatic contact. The response was immediate and decidedly undiplomatic. Alien vessels, this is Colony Defense Command. You have entered restricted space during Condition Orange alert status. Withdraw immediately, or face defensive action. We are not impressed by your peaceful invasion tactics. We've been expecting you. Admiral Drahorn's diplomatic training had not prepared him for being accused of using peaceful invasion tactics. He tried again. Human colony, there appears to be a misunderstanding. We are explorers, not invaders. We wish to establish friendly relations. Sure you do, came the sardonic reply. That's exactly what our invasion protocols predicted you'd say. Step 2 is usually offering us gifts in exchange for cooperation, followed by gradual subjugation. We've read the playbook. Aliens, we wrote better countermeasures. Morton, the fleet's cultural specialist, observed the exchange with the deadpan expression his species was famous for. Admiral, I believe we're experiencing what humans call a shoot first, ask questions later mentality. Though in this case they appear to have asked the questions 2 centuries ago, and decided they didn't like the probable answers. As if to emphasize the point, another volley of warning shots bracketed their position with uncomfortable precision. Brandon Torres' voice cut through the chaos with grim professional assessment. Admiral, I've analyzed their weapons signatures. This is impossible, but their targeting systems appear to be specifically designed for our ship configurations. They're using weapons optimized for our shield frequencies, our hull compositions, even our crew physiology. How is that possible? Admiral Vashy demanded. They've never encountered our species before. Sir, Brandon replied with the kind of scientific precision that made horrible news sound even more horrible. I believe they've spent 2 centuries preparing countermeasures for every known spacefaring species in the galaxy. They didn't prepare for aliens. They prepared for us specifically. The terrible realization settled over the bridge like a funeral shroud. These humans weren't just paranoid. They were competently, professionally, devastatingly paranoid. And they had been preparing for this exact scenario since before most of the bridge crew had been born. Sir, General Krafnog announced quietly. I'm beginning to think we might lose this fight. What followed could only be described as the most efficiently terrifying mobilization Admiral Vashy had ever witnessed. Within 30 minutes of their first exchange, the human colony transformed from a seemingly peaceful settlement into what appeared to be a military machine that had been waiting centuries for exactly this moment. Admiral Amy Kowalski reported from her reconnaissance position, her voice carrying the kind of professional appreciation one might reserve for watching a master craftsman at work. You need to see this. The entire colony is mobilizing. And I mean the entire colony. The main screen displayed scenes that defied every assumption the aliens had made about human civilization. Elderly humans, moving with the practiced efficiency of lifetime soldiers, were converting agricultural equipment into siege weapons with modifications that appeared to have been pre-planned and rehearsed. Farming tractors sprouted weapon mounts. Irrigation systems transformed into defensive barriers. Even the livestock seemed to be following some kind of evacuation protocol. Are those children manning the anti-aircraft batteries? Commander Molly asked, his gelatinous form rippling with what might have been nervous laughter. Affirmative, Amy replied. And they're disturbingly good at it. I watched a 7-year-old calculate firing solutions, while her grandmother loaded ammunition. They're treating this like it's a school drill they've practiced their entire lives. Judge Quintara looked up from her intelligence console with the expression of someone who had just solved a puzzle, and discovered the picture was far more disturbing than expected. Admiral, I've been analyzing their tactical communication. This isn't improvised. They have detailed battle plans for this exact scenario. They've assigned specific roles to every civilian based on age, physical capability, and skill set. Their children aren't just manning weapons. They're following a comprehensive defense protocol that includes redundant command structures, supply chain management, and casualty projection models. Brandon Torres materialized on screen with his characteristic sardonic expression. Sir, I've completed my analysis of their defensive capabilities. The good news is that we could probably win a direct assault. The bad news is that our casualties would be approximately 60% of our fleet, and they appear to have backup plans for their backup plan. Admiral Vashy stared at the tactical display, watching as the human colony arranged itself into a defensive formation that looked suspiciously like it had been designed by someone who understood exactly how alien military doctrine worked. How is this possible? How could an isolated colony develop such specific countermeasures? Sir, Moran announced, his geometric form shifting into patterns of urgent attention. I've intercepted a data transmission from the colony to what appears to be an automated archive system. Decrypting now, and oh my. What is it, Moran? Admiral Vashy demanded, though he was beginning to suspect that every answer only made the situation worse. Admiral, this colony wasn't lost. They were, well, the diplomatic term would be strategically relocated. The less diplomatic term would be exiled for being too dangerous to keep around. Moran paused, processing the data with what passed for digital embarrassment. According to these records, the colony was founded by a group of humans that Earth's government considered excessively paranoid and militarily destabilizing. General Krafnog's 4 eyes focused with the intensity of someone receiving personally devastating news. Define excessively paranoid. Well, Moran continued, they were military strategists who spent their careers developing worst-case scenarios for alien contact. When Earth's government decided to pursue peaceful expansion and diplomatic contact protocols, these individuals were encouraged to establish their own colony where they could pursue their theories without causing unnecessary panic among the general population. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. These weren't primitive humans or even typical military colonists. These were the humans that other humans had considered too militarily aggressive to live with. So Earth exiled their most paranoid military strategists to an isolated colony, Admiral Vashy said slowly. And those strategists have spent 200 years developing countermeasures for theoretical alien invasion scenarios. Correct, Moran confirmed. And based on their archived communications, they've been quite productive during their exile. They've developed tactical responses for 47 different theoretical alien species, including detailed analysis of probable technology levels, military doctrines, and physiological vulnerabilities. Commander Molly's form had shifted to a distinctly unhealthy shade of gray. Did they specifically prepare for us? Oh yes, Moran replied with digital cheerfulness. In fact, your species was designated Threat Classification 7, diplomatically aggressive colonizers with advanced shield technology and probable overconfidence issues. The accuracy was devastating. Admiral Drehorn, who had been attempting diplomatic communication for the past hour, with increasingly limited success, finally looked up from his console. Admiral, I've been trying to establish proper diplomatic contact, but their communication protocols are unusual. They keep asking me to state my invasion parameters and provide casualty estimates for immediate surrender. Try explaining that we're explorers, Admiral Vashy suggested desperately. I did. They asked me to define explorations, and then provided a list of 17 historical examples of species who claimed to be explorers before implementing gradual territorial acquisition programs. Morden observed the proceedings with his species' characteristic deadpan expression. Admiral, I believe we're experiencing what military historians call a prepared defense scenario. The humans have spent centuries developing responses to this exact situation. We, on the other hand, prepared for standard first contact with primitive species. The standoff continued for another 18 hours. The alien fleet found itself in the uncomfortable position of being too committed to retreat, but too cautious to advance. Every probe they sent was met with precise defensive fire that demonstrated the humans' ability to destroy their ships, while somehow managing not to do so. It was the kind of professional military courtesy that was somehow more terrifying than open hostility. Then quite suddenly, everything changed. Admiral Morin announced with the digital equivalent of excitement. "I'm receiving a transmission from the colony. It appears to be an apology." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a middle-aged human woman in what appeared to be a military uniform, covered in so many defensive modifications, it looked more like powered armor. Her expression was a unique combination of professional embarrassment and stubborn defiance. "Alien vessels, this is Colonel Rebecca Martinez, Defense Coordinator for New Paranoia Colony. She paused, consulting something off-screen. "We may have experienced a minor communication protocol error." Admiral Vashy blinked his 3 eyes in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. "Define minor communication protocol error." "Well," Colonel Martinez continued, her expression growing more embarrassed by the second, "it appears that your initial transmission was encoded using standard galactic diplomatic frequencies, which our automated defense systems were programmed to interpret as sophisticated invasion coordination signals." Judge Quintara looked up from her console with the expression of someone who had just witnessed the universe's most expensive misunderstanding. "Admiral, I've analyzed their communication logs. When we transmitted greetings and peaceful intentions, their translation systems converted it to commence attack pattern alpha. Disabled defensive systems for easier occupation." The silence that followed was profound enough to have its own gravitational field. "So," Admiral Vashy said slowly, "you've been preparing for war because you thought we were invading." "Correct," Colonel Martinez replied. "And you've been trying to establish diplomatic contact because you thought we were a primitive colony in need of assistance." "Also correct." The two military leaders stared at each other across the vast distances of space and cultural misunderstanding, both realizing simultaneously that they had spent 48 hours in a deadly standoff based on what amounted to a translation error of galactic proportions. "Would you," Colonel Martinez asked hesitantly, "like to start over? We could probably manage some proper diplomatic protocols, though I should mention that our civilian population is still at battle stations, and might take some time to fully stand down. Old habits and all that." Admiral Vashy considered the smoking remains of his dignified first contact mission, and decided that salvaging any kind of diplomatic relationship was preferable to explaining to headquarters how he had accidentally started a war with humans who were better prepared for it than he was. "That," he said with as much dignity as he could manage, "sounds like an excellent idea. Though I should probably mention that we're going to need to conduct these negotiations while you're pointing weapons at us, aren't we?" "Oh yes," Colonel Martinez replied cheerfully. "Absolutely. It's nothing personal, it's just policy. We'll be happy to discuss peaceful relations, trade agreements, cultural exchange, whatever you'd like, but we're definitely keeping the weapons trained on you until we're completely sure you're not planning to subjugate us later." And so began the most heavily armed diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. The first formal diplomatic meeting took place in what Colonel Martinez cheerfully described as the least fortified conference room on the colony. Admiral Vashy's security detail counted 17 visible weapon emplacements, 3 automated defense turrets, and what appeared to be a tactical nuclear device disguised as a coffee dispenser. "Please, sit wherever you're comfortable," Colonel Martinez offered graciously, gesturing to chairs that had obviously been designed with alien physiology in mind. "We've been studying galactic species for 2 centuries, so we thought we'd be prepared for this. Though I have to admit, actually meeting you is much less terrifying than we expected." Judge Quintara settled into a chair that accommodated her 4-armed frame with suspicious precision. "You designed furniture for species you'd never met." "Oh yes," Martinez replied, matter-of-factly. "Part of our standard invasion preparation protocols. Know your enemy, make them comfortable while you interrogate them, that sort of thing. Though since you're apparently not enemies, I suppose it's just good hospitality now." General Krafnog examined the refreshments with the caution of someone who had learned not to trust anything produced by humans. "This beverage, it's not weaponized, is it?" "Only the caffeine content," Martinez assured him. "Though I should warn you that our coffee has been known to cause heart palpitations in species with multiple cardiovascular systems." As the negotiations progressed, The alien delegation began to understand that what they had initially interpreted as paranoid aggression was actually a remarkably sophisticated survival strategy. The humans hadn't spent 2 centuries preparing for war because they were violent. They had spent 2 centuries preparing for war because they were absolutely convinced that someone somewhere was planning to attack them, and they preferred to be embarrassingly overprepared rather than slightly underprepared. You have to understand our philosophy, Colonel Martinez explained during a break in the trade discussions while both sides remained politely armed. Our founders were exiled from Earth for what the government called excessive military preparedness. We prefer to think of it as appropriate caution in an uncertain universe. After all, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Commander Molly, who had been quietly documenting human defensive capabilities for the past 6 hours, looked up from his notes. And by they you mean everyone, Martinez replied cheerfully. Aliens, other human colonies, rogue artificial intelligences, time travelers, interdimensional invaders, hostile space fauna, and anything else we haven't thought of yet. Our planning committee meets every Tuesday to discuss new potential threats. Morden observed this exchange with his species' characteristic deadpan expression. You have a committee dedicated to inventing new things to be afraid of. Innovation is important in any field, Martinez confirmed. Last month they identified a potential threat from reverse-time merchants who sell defective causality. We're still working on countermeasures for that one. Within a week, news of the new paranoia colony had spread throughout the galactic community, with the kind of speed reserved for really good gossip and really terrifying military intelligence. The story improved with each retelling, until humans were being described as a species that could turn farming equipment into siege weapons and taught their children advanced xenobiology before potty training. The Galactic Council's emergency session lasted 14 hours and concluded with a unanimous resolution to approach all human settlements with extreme diplomatic caution and adequate defensive preparations. 3 separate species requested detailed military intelligence about human capabilities, not because they planned to attack humans, but because they wanted to make absolutely certain they never accidentally provoked them. The Zephyrian ambassador summed up the general sentiment during the closed session. If these are the humans that other humans considered too dangerous to live with, what exactly are the normal humans capable of? Meanwhile, the Confederation's Department of Xenological Studies quietly updated their threat assessment protocols to include a new category, species with competent paranoia disorders. Colonel Martinez found herself in the unexpected position of fielding diplomatic inquiries from 17 different civilizations, all of whom wanted to establish friendly, non-threatening relations with the colony. The requests were remarkably similar in tone. They all emphasized their peaceful intentions while carefully avoiding any language that might be interpreted as even remotely aggressive. The ultimate irony came 6 months later when the Galactic Defense Council formally invited New Paranoia Colony to join the Confederation as defensive consultants. Their invitation letter was a masterpiece of diplomatic cautiousness, describing their offer as a mutually beneficial arrangement wherein your colony's extensive security expertise might assist other member worlds in developing appropriate defensive measures against theoretical future threats. Colonel Martinez read the invitation aloud to her staff with visible amusement. They want us to teach other species how to be paranoid. Well, her deputy commander observed, we are pretty good at it. True, Martinez agreed. And it does seem like a shame to waste 2 centuries of preparation. Accept the invitation, but make sure they understand we're keeping all our weapons. Admiral Vashy's final report to Galactic Command became required reading at the Diplomatic Academy, primarily as an example of how first contact situations could become unexpectedly complicated. His concluding remarks were later carved into the wall of the Emergency Protocol Training Center. Recommendation: all future human contacts should be approached with the assumption that they are significantly more prepared for conflict than their apparent technology level suggests. Humans appear to possess what can only be described as constructive paranoias, the ability to prepare for threats that do not yet exist with a thoroughness that borders on the supernatural. While this makes them excellent allies, it also makes them extremely poor targets for any form of aggressive action. Suggest updating first contact protocols to include warnings about engaging species who treat peace through superior firepower as a legitimate diplomatic philosophy. He paused in his dictation, considering his next words carefully. Personal note: the humans have offered to share their threat assessment methodologies with other species. I have recommended that Command accept this offer, if only to understand how they managed to predict our arrival with such devastating accuracy. Also, their coffee is surprisingly good, though I recommend limiting consumption to 1 cup per day for species with multiple hearts. The final line of his report became legendary throughout Galactic Command. It appears that in the vast cosmos, there are three kinds of species: those who seek peace, those who prepare for war, and humans who prepare for war so thoroughly that everyone else seeks peace with them. And somewhere in the files of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps, a small addendum was quietly added to the Universal First Contact Protocols. When approaching human settlements, always announce peaceful intentions clearly, bring gifts, and under no circumstances attempt to surprise them.